I remember the moment the sky broke apart. 1 second, the horizon hummed with its usual lull, monitors blinking softly, the distant murmur of scientists running calculations, and me, staring at the endless black, trying to catch a whisper of home. Then the explosion. The Eldrin fleet hit the human colony on Kepler for 42b like a storm of death. Fire bloomed across their cities in a heartbeat. From my communications post, I saw every signal shatter and fade. We were cut off, isolated, and utterly alone. But then, the faintest pulse. A coded message buried deep in the noise. A fragment of Earth's voice, crackling through the void. If you hear this, we are not what they believe. We are more. Those words haunted me, because I knew, deep down, the Eldrin were trying to wipe humanity off the cosmic map. But maybe, just maybe, Earth held secrets they didn't understand. Secrets worth fighting for. I grabbed the decoded message and whispered back into the void. Not today. If you want, I can write the next chapter now or expand any part of this. How do you want to proceed? You said, explain chapter 1 into 1500 to 1700 words. ChatGPT said, updated saved memory. Here is the full expanded version of chapter 1. Last signal from Echoes of the Starborn, written in engaging first-person style and around 1500 to 1700 words. Chapter 1. Last signal. They say space is silent. That's a lie. Out here, it hums. It whispers. It sings in the language of data, radiation, gravitational waves, a constant conversation between stars and machines. You just have to know how to listen. I'm Alex Vega, senior comms tech aboard the Horizon, a deep space listening station positioned in the Kepler expanse, 126 light-years from Earth. It's not the most glamorous post, but it's mine. I monitor deep band transmissions, decode anomalies, and occasionally stop people from sending birthday messages to relatives at faster-than-light speeds. The job had its moments of excitement, though most of them involved fixing a microwave that liked to misfire during solar storms. Until the day the sky burned. It started like any other shift. I was halfway through a cup of synthetic coffee, burnt, bitter, but reliable, when the alert siren screamed. Not the usual soft chimes of system pings or proximity warnings, but the gut-wrenching, soul-freezing klaxon that meant only one thing. Colony under attack. I scrambled to my console. Lines of red warnings poured across the interface. Kepler, 442b. Signal disruption detected. All channels down. Emergency protocol initiated. My fingers flew over the controls. I opened every frequency band, boosted gain, rerouted power from non-essential systems. I bypassed the firewall, something I wasn't supposed to do, and dove into the raw data stream. Somewhere in the chaos, there had to be something, anything. Then I saw it. Not a call for help, not a distress beacon, just a flicker, a pulse embedded in the electromagnetic rubble. Too regular to be natural, too weak to be coincidence. A coded signal. I locked in on it, isolated the waveform, and started decoding. The pattern was old, pre-expansion era, used back when Earth still worried about stealth and interplanetary conflicts. Hardly anyone knew it existed, but I'd studied ancient comms protocols as a side hobby for fun that probably saved my life. The message unraveled slowly, its fragments patchy and corrupted. The visuals were gone, just static and black, but the audio survived. Barely. A voice, cracked and echoing, spoken in that low, deliberate cadence used when someone knew they were dying. If you hear this, we are not what they believe. We are more. I froze. Not a warning. A declaration. I replayed it again and again, looping it until I knew every word by heart. The message was Earth-coded, from a sub-channel reserved for black site comms, which meant someone at the colony knew this was coming and wanted to pass something on before it was too late. What did they mean by we are more? The rest of the crew was already scrambling. Commander Liao barked orders from the command deck, trying to re-establish contact with Earth. The sensors picked up Eldrin ships warping out of the system. The bastards hadn't just attacked the colony. They'd erased it. No survivors. No warning. Just silence. I uploaded the signal fragment to my encrypted drive and locked it down. Not protocol, but if what I just heard was real, it needed to survive. 3 hours later, we got the official word. Kepler, for 42b has fallen. Total loss. No recovery mission authorized. Remain on station. Await further instructions. And just like that, the system moved on, as if 70,000 lives were just a database error. as if the galaxy hadn't just changed. But I couldn't move on. That voice echoed in my skull. Not just the words, but the tone, defiant, unyielding, like a spark trying to ignite something long buried. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. I sat alone in the comms bay, eyes red, coffee cold, playing with the signal like a puzzle with missing pieces. I ran it through every filter I could find. I compared it to ancient Earth transmissions. I ran a cryptographic cross-scan through the ARC codex, the archive of pre-FTL knowledge locked in our databanks. And then I found it. Embedded in the signal was a secondary cipher. Not audio, not text, DNA. Specifically, a sequence tied to the human genome. Ancient, dormant, a signature of something that shouldn't exist anymore, if it ever did. Something old Earth scientists once referred to as the Starborn Echo. It was theoretical, a myth. The idea that humanity had, in some forgotten era, come from the stars long before our current rise. That we were seeded or descended from a precursor civilization wiped out by time or war. The theory had been dismissed, filed away under fringe pseudoscience. But there it was, in a dying signal from a dead colony, a map hidden in our own blood. I downloaded everything, backed it up in triplicate, then stared at the blinking cursor for what felt like an hour. The Eldrin hadn't just attacked the colony. They'd tried to silence a truth. Once someone had died to pass on. I couldn't let that go. I reported none of it. The official logs would show corrupted data, no viable messages. I kept the real payload offline, isolated, and safe. The next morning, I submitted a request for immediate transfer to Earth. Commander Liao raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. She knew something big had shifted. She always could read people too well. "Be careful, Vega," she said. "Whatever you found, it's not nothing." I nodded, hand hovering over the encrypted drive in my coat. "It's not nothing," I agreed. "It might be everything." When the shuttle departed, I watched the stars blur and stretch into lines. Part of me still wanted to turn back, to pretend it never happened, to stay in the cold comfort of routine. But that was the part that had let humanity sleep while enemies circled. And I wasn't going to sleep anymore. The universe had just tried to snuff us out. Time to remind it why that's a mistake. Earth was never quiet. You'd think, after 100 years of climate recovery, a unifying global government, at least in theory, and the wonders of space colonization, we'd have found peace. But no, Earth buzzed, like a beehive that had lost its queen, loud, tense, full of stingers waiting for a reason to strike. I touched down at the Transorbit Hub in Nairobi Arcology, the largest city spire on the African continent. Skyglass towers glinted in the sunlight, a fusion of steel and solar mesh that reflected humanity's progress and its fractures. The first thing I noticed? The protests. Thousands of people had gathered around the Interplanetary Affairs Hall, holding signs, chanting, demanding accountability for the Kepler massacre. A wall of riot drones hovered in formation above them, hissing like angry insects. The second thing I noticed was how no one in authority looked surprised, as if 70,000 lives vaporized in a matter of seconds was just another bullet point on the newsfeed. I clutched my encrypted drive tighter inside my jacket and pushed through the crowd. I had one priority: find someone who could help me understand what the hell I had. I met up with someone I hadn't seen in nearly a decade, Dr. Ren Halliday, my old professor at the Institute of Post-Human Studies. She'd once called me hopelessly idealistic and dangerously curious. I took it as a compliment. She greeted me with her usual grim smile and took me into her private lab 2 stories beneath the institute. "You disappeared for 5 years and show up with a military-grade encryption drive and an urgent message about a dead colony," she said, pouring herself something synthetic and vile-smelling. "Tell me, Alex, should I be worried or excited?" "Both," I replied, sliding the drive across her desk. She inserted it into a quantum port and began decrypting. Her fingers danced across the hollow interface with familiar grace, but I could see the tension in her jaw as the files began to unfold. She didn't speak for several minutes. Then, "This is impossible." "Say that again with more scientific clarity." "This signal, it's ancient, Alex. You weren't wrong. The linguistic markers, the encryption layers, the DNA fragment. It all lines up with those old starborn hypotheses. Theories everyone wrote off." She nodded, pulling up ancient papers, hers, in fact, and those of long-dead researchers who'd once suggested humanity's rise was not entirely organic. That something or someone had seeded our evolution with purpose. That hidden within our genetic structure were dormant capacities and warnings. Then it's real. I asked. She exhaled slowly. If this is legitimate, and I believe it is, then humanity is far more than we've ever believed, and more dangerous. Dangerous how? You ever wonder why the Eldrin never invaded Earth directly? We've had border skirmishes, sure, but full-on war? No. They always focused on colonies, peripheral worlds, easy targets, because Earth's too well defended. No, she said, eyes narrowing. Because maybe they're afraid of waking something up. The room fell silent. Ren began running deep scans on the DNA fragment encoded in the signal. It was small, no more than a couple hundred base pairs, but its structure suggested a complex multi-stage activation, like a key waiting to turn in the right lock. Let's say this is a trigger, I said. What does it unlock? She glanced at me, her gaze unreadable. We didn't go to the authorities. That was out of the question. Earth's central administration was too fractured, too cautious. Between the League of Nations, the Martian Bloc, the Lunar Directorate, and the half-dozen corporate syndicates with seats on the Planetary Council, nothing ever got done fast. And if the wrong people saw this, they'd bury it, or worse, try to weaponize it. Instead, Ren reached out to someone she trusted, someone with access to an off-grid black site known as Project Lucent, hidden beneath Antarctica's southern expanse. Officially, it was an abandoned terraforming research hub. Unofficially, it was where Earth tested technologies it didn't want anyone asking questions about. We boarded a suborbital skimmer that night. It was a 12-hour flight across desolate white nothing, made longer by the tension. Ren didn't speak much, too absorbed in decrypting more layers of the signal. I stared out the viewport, watching the stars and wondering which ones harbored fleets like the ones that raised Kepler. In a way, I was glad I couldn't see Earth's full surface anymore. I didn't want to face it head-on. The planet we turned into a fortress, beautiful but brittle, watching the galaxy turn without knowing its own place in it. Project Lucent was buried 5 kilometers beneath the Antarctic ice, shielded from satellite detection and planetary scans. We were met by a man named Dallin Rourke, ex-military intelligence, current director of Lucent. You bring ghosts, Dr. Halliday, he said with a nod to the drive. We don't like ghosts. Ren ignored him. You'll like this one. It's in our blood. Rourke took us to a cryo-cooled lab surrounded by magnetic shielding. There were no AI systems allowed in the core. The data was too sensitive, and too many black programs had learned the hard way what happened when you gave an AI access to experimental genetic code. Ren presented the signal. I gave my first-hand account of what happened on Horizon. Rourke listened without interruption, his face like stone. When we were done, he tapped a finger on the steel table. There have always been rumors, he said. Back in military intelligence, we used to hear about the ghost genome. Some thought it was a myth. Others said Earth was seeded as a test bed, part of some ancient arms race. Humanity as a biological failsafe. And the Eldrin know? I asked. They don't just know. They're scared. That's why they hit Kepler. They must have intercepted the activation signal. Ren folded her arms. Which means they'll come for Earth next. Rourke nodded. Unless we act first. He turned to me. You said you were close to the signal source, and you carry human standard DNA markers. If we're going to test activation, you're the logical candidate. I felt my stomach twist. You want to put something ancient and unknown into my genome? What if it kills me? Rourke's response was simple. What if it doesn't? I spent 3 hours alone in a chamber designed for genomic rewriting. They called it the Crucible. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't painless. And it wasn't guaranteed. The DNA fragment wasn't injected. It was fused, bonded through a nanite-laced retrovirus that targeted dormant gene clusters and unlocked them with electromagnetic pulses. At first, it felt like fire under my skin. Then my blood turned to lightning. I don't remember screaming, but Ren told me later I did. Loudly. I blacked out halfway through the 3rd wave of activation. My mind cracked open like a shell. I saw things. Fractals of memory that weren't mine. Star charts etched into thought. A voice that wasn't a voice whispering a name I didn't understand. Starborn. When I woke, I wasn't the same. I could see energy currents moving through the walls. I could feel the presence of others in the lab before I opened my eyes. My thoughts were faster, deeper, too wide to be contained. I smelled ozone. My veins thrummed with it. Rourke stepped into the chamber in a hazard suit. You're awake, he said. And alive. Barely, I croaked. Then we're in business. Ren examined me, eyes wide with both wonder and fear. "You've changed, Alex. Your vitals are human. But there's something else, something beneath it, like a resonance. I think the genome activated more than just abilities. It reconnected you to something." I nodded slowly. "I know. I felt it." Rourke didn't waste time. "You're not just a tech anymore, Vega. You're proof. A living key. We're going to need you." "For what?" He leaned in, his expression hard. "To start a fire the Eldrin can't put out." I spent the next 3 days in isolation, adjusting to the changes. My thoughts moved like rivers, sometimes fast and overwhelming, sometimes quiet and deep. I could interface with machines through touch. My reaction times were off the charts. But more than that, I could sense connection to something old, dormant, watching. Whatever the Starborn were, whatever their purpose had been, it was still out there, waiting to be remembered. On the 4th day, Rourke called a briefing. He pulled up a map of the outer colonies, highlighting 3 that had recently gone silent. No signals, no survivors, no evidence left behind. "They're eliminating potential activation points," he said. "They're trying to erase the last sparks before they ignite." Ren looked at me. "Then we light the fuse." I nodded. No more hiding. No more listening from the edges. The call of Earth had been answered. Now it was time to speak back, loud enough for the galaxy to hear. The past has a habit of catching up with you, like a shadow you can't outrun. No matter how fast you run, how far you travel. After the activation in the Crucible, after feeling the Starborn stir inside me, I thought the biggest fight ahead was with the Eldrin, or whoever they really were. But the deeper I dug, the clearer it became that the real battle might be with my own history, with ghosts I never knew existed. I woke that morning to the sterile hum of Project Lucent. The lab was cold, artificially lit by a dull blue glow. Ren was already there, waiting beside the viewport that looked out into the endless whiteness of Antarctica's ice. "You look like you barely slept," she said without turning. I rubbed my eyes, still feeling the echo of that strange voice, Starborn, ringing in my mind. The activation didn't just change my body. It had cracked open a part of me that had always been locked tight, like a door I didn't know existed in my brain. "The visions won't stop," I admitted. "Fragments, star systems, ancient ruins, and memories that aren't mine." Ren nodded slowly, her expression a mix of fascination and concern. "You're experiencing what we call the Starborn Echo. It's rare and usually lethal. The fact you're alive means your genome has adapted faster than anyone we've ever tested. You're tapping into something vast, something ancient." "Tell me what you know," I said. "Every piece." She pulled up a holographic display of classified archives, dusty files no one talked about anymore. Decades ago, during the first exocontact, humanity made a startling discovery on a derelict asteroid near the Tau Ceti system. She began. An ancient probe, clearly alien, with inscriptions unlike anything we'd seen before. The probe contained partial maps and data fragments hinting at a civilization called the Starborn. "They were supposed to be myth," I interrupted. "Fairy tales scientists told to explain human evolution? More like forbidden knowledge," Ren corrected. "Governments erased most of it from public records. But internally, some researchers believed the Starborn seeded DNA across many species, Earth's hominids included. They theorized the Starborn were a progenitor race, or guardians, who planted evolutionary catalysts across the galaxy." I swallowed hard. "So the DNA fragment I carry isn't just a key. It's a legacy." "Exactly." Before I could ask more, Rourke stormed in, grim-faced. "We have a problem," he said. "A big one." He brought up live feeds from orbital sensors showing a vessel, massive, sleek, and deadly, entering the Sol system's outer perimeter. "Eldrin warship," he confirmed. "They're closing in on Earth, and they're not here to negotiate." The weight of it hit me like a blow. "They knew about the activation," I said, voice steady but cold. "They're coming for me." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "More than that, they want the activation stopped, permanently." The next hours blurred into a flurry of preparation. Ren and her team analyzed every data point they had on the Eldrin. Their technology was terrifying, a fusion of bioengineering and advanced AI. Their ships were living organisms capable of adapting mid-battle. Rourke coordinated with covert planetary defense forces. Earth wasn't ready for open war. Not yet. But we had something they didn't. Me. A Starborn key. The moments before the strike were surreal. I stood on the observation deck of Project Lucent, looking out across the frozen ice, feeling the hum of energy in my veins. Ren approached me quietly. "Whatever happens, Alex, remember this. You are more than human now. You carry the strength of an ancient race within you. Don't let fear control you. I nodded. I won't. Then the attack began. The sky outside lit up with bursts of energy as Eldrin fighters swarmed the orbital defenses. Explosions rippled through the atmosphere. I could hear the low rumble of seismic activity as their weapons targeted installations on the surface. The security systems locked down the facility in lockdown protocol. Ren grabbed my arm. We have to move now. We raced to the underground transport bay, the hull shaking from impact. The starborn powers inside me flared. I could sense the energy flows of the ship, the building, even the quaking ice outside. In that moment, I realized something. The Eldrin weren't just attacking to destroy. They were trying to silence the starborn echo to erase humanity's true potential. We boarded a stealth shuttle bound for orbit. The launch sequence was frantic. Alarms blared as the ship shook violently from near misses. From the viewport, I watched Earth's surface flash with firestorms. Cities I once knew were disappearing beneath waves of Eldrin assault. Yet through the chaos, I felt an ancient whisper grow louder inside me. A surge of power flooded my veins. Raw, electric, alive. I raised my hand, and the console's interface flickered, responding to thoughts alone. I realized then that I could interface with technology in ways no human should be able to. Ren stared at me, awestruck. You're becoming something else. Maybe, I said, voice steady despite the storm. But this is just the beginning. Our shuttle slipped through the chaos, heading toward a secret Earth orbital station known as the Aegis, the last line of defense. Rourke was waiting when we docked. Welcome to the front line, he said grimly. We're organizing a resistance. He laid out a plan. I was to be the spearhead. Using my new abilities, I would lead covert operations to locate and awaken other dormant starborn across Earth's colonies. Are there really others? I asked. Ren nodded. Ancient DNA markers scattered like seeds in the wind. Some already awake, others still hidden. But why me? I wondered aloud. Why did the activation choose me? Rourke's eyes darkened. Because you're the last hope of a species that was never meant to be ordinary. That night, alone in a small quarters aboard the Aegis, I replayed everything in my mind. The Starborn, the Eldrin, the activation. The ancient battles fought long before humanity had even looked up at the stars. I felt the weight of history pressing down, but also a fire burning inside. A fierce determination not to let humanity's legacy be erased. For the first time since Horizon, I understood my purpose. I was more than a survivor. I was a reclaimer. The echoes of the past were loud, but they were guiding me forward. And the war for humanity's future was just beginning. The silence of space is deceptive. Out here, drifting on the edge of Earth's orbit aboard the Aegis, you can feel it pressing in on you like a physical weight, a quiet before the storm. But it wasn't just the vast emptiness that unsettled me, it was the enormity of what lay ahead. I was no longer just Alex, the human. I was the vessel for something far older, far more powerful. A starborn key, awakening echoes buried deep in my DNA, connecting me to a lineage I barely understood, a lineage that could decide the fate of the entire galaxy. Our mission was clear: find others like me. The dormant starborn scattered across Earth's colonies, hidden in plain sight. People who carried that ancient genetic code but didn't yet know it. People who, once awakened, could join the resistance and fight back against the Eldrin invasion. But how do you find what you don't know exists? How do you wake a ghost from 1,000-year sleep? Ren and I spent hours poring over data, correlating ancient genetic markers with population records, biotechnical scans, and neural activity logs from various settlements and space stations. It was like searching for a needle in a cosmic haystack, a single flicker of light in billions of stars. Here, Ren finally said, pointing to a cluster of colonies orbiting the outer rim of the Sol system. Several candidates show faint starborn signatures, low-level activations, unconscious potentials. If anyone's close, it's them. Any way to reach them without alerting Eldrin surveillance? I asked. Ren frowned. That's the problem. Our communication channels are monitored. We'll have to send a covert team. Rourke volunteered immediately, eyes blazing with that fierce determination I'd come to respect. Alongside him, a squad of elite operatives, the best we had, were prepped for stealth insertion. I felt the weight of responsibility settle heavy on my shoulders. I wasn't just their symbol anymore. I was their leader, their beacon. I had to learn fast. Before the mission, Ren came to me with a device, sleek, small, and humming with latent energy. This is a neural sync interface, she explained. It'll let you connect directly with the starborn DNA and others. You'll be able to awaken their potential faster, but it's risky. The connection overloads neural pathways. Some never recover. I swallowed hard. No risk, no reward. She gave me a tight nod. We'll monitor you remotely. Just be careful. The shuttle left the Aegis under cover of darkness, slipping through debris fields and sensor blind spots. As we approached the first colony, a sprawling mining outpost called Haven 7, I braced myself. The others were already preparing for insertion. Stay sharp, Rourke said. We get in, find the targets, and get out before they even know we were here. I volunteered to be the first to connect. We found the target, a technician named Mara, in her late 20s, working alone in the colony's data hub. Her biosigns were faint but present, a flicker beneath the surface. As I placed the neural sync device against her temple, a shockwave of images and emotions slammed through me. Memories not mine, centuries-old battles, star systems aflame, alien voices chanting in a tongue I couldn't understand, but also hope, strength, the indomitable will to survive. Mara gasped awake, eyes wide, shimmering with a strange light. Who? What? She whispered. You're starborn, I said softly. You carry a legacy and a power that's been waiting to awaken. Her expression shifted from confusion to awe, then determination. Over the next several hours, we repeated the process, each awakening revealing more of the hidden truth behind the starborn. They weren't just a myth or an ancient experiment. They were warriors, explorers, and guardians, a civilization wiped out by the Eldrin in a war that spanned galaxies. And now, their last hope was being reborn through us. But with every new awakening came new dangers. The Eldrin's hunting parties were closing in faster than we anticipated. Their probes had detected unusual neural activity on Haven 7. Before we could extract the newly awakened starborn, an alarm blared, Eldrin soldiers pouring into the colony. Chaos exploded around us. I felt the starborn energy surge within, the ancient power unlocking hidden reflexes and strength. We fought with a fury I never knew I had, dodging blasts, ripping through alien bioarmor, and protecting the civilians caught in the crossfire. The new starborn awakened alongside me, their powers flaring to life in bursts of light and energy that cut through the darkness. Mara raised her hands, unleashing a wave of energy that knocked back a dozen Eldrin soldiers. Her voice was steady. We fight for our future. We managed to retreat to the shuttle, the Eldrin in hot pursuit. As we escaped the colony's atmosphere, the truth hit me like a punch. The war wasn't just for Earth. It was for every human colony, every settlement scattered across the stars. And the Eldrin weren't just invaders. They were executioners, trying to erase the starborn legacy forever. Back aboard the Aegis, the newly awakened starborn were quiet, processing the flood of memories and powers now coursing through them. I found Mara alone in a small chamber, eyes distant. Does it hurt? I asked gently. She nodded. It's like waking from a nightmare and a dream all at once. I remember things I shouldn't. And I feel the weight of responsibility like the whole universe is watching. I put a hand on her shoulder. We're in this together. You're not alone. That night, I sat alone in the observation deck, staring out into the blackness. The starborn inside me whispered secrets, warnings, and promises. A galactic war lost to time, a future written in stardust and blood. But in those echoes, I found resolve. We were humanity's last hope, a new generation of warriors born from ancient stars, and we would fight to reclaim our place among the cosmos. The awakening was only the beginning. The real battle for the future was just starting. When you awaken an ancient power inside yourself, you expect to face enemies out in the cold darkness of space, alien warships, merciless invaders, or some cosmic force beyond comprehension. What you don't expect is the war to turn inward. The starborn legacy that had been unlocked inside me was like a living storm, fierce and unpredictable. Every day, I could feel it pushing and pulling, as if a force older than time was fighting to control me. And the fight wasn't just against the Eldrin, but against the darkness brewing inside my own mind. It started subtly, a flicker in my vision, like a shadow darting at the edge of awareness. Whispered voices in a language I almost understood. Dreams that felt like memories, but twisted, darkened, full of threats and promises. One night, I woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a war drum. The starborn power inside me roared with fury and fear, like something trapped, desperate to break free. I knew then the truth I'd been avoiding. The activation wasn't a gift without cost. It was a burden, a seed of chaos planted inside me. Ren noticed the change immediately. "You're pushing too hard," she said quietly one morning in the lab. "The neural sinks, the missions, the constant strain. It's fracturing your mind." I shook my head. "I'm fine." She looked at me with the kind of worry you only see in people who have seen too much pain to ignore the signs. "Alex, the starborn DNA isn't just power. It's a consciousness, a collective memory. It's like carrying the souls of an entire civilization inside your head. If you don't keep it balanced, it will consume you." I swallowed hard. How do I keep it from taking over? By learning control, by understanding it, but also by trusting others. "You can't carry this alone." That hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I'd been alone in my fight. A lone human carrying the weight of a forgotten war. But Ren was right. I needed help. The new starborn I helped awaken, Mara, Jalen, and Rena, became my anchors. We trained together, pushing the limits of our powers. I learned to harness the bursts of energy, the flashes of premonition, the strange ability to interface with technology through thought alone. But the darkness within me grew stronger. Sometimes, in moments of exhaustion, I'd lose control. My vision would blur, and for seconds, I would feel something else, a cold, calculating presence. The voice of the Eldrin's ancient enemy, or maybe something worse. One night, it happened again. I was alone in the training room, practicing channeling energy through my hands. The room shimmered as a soft blue glow pulsed from my palms. Suddenly, my vision distorted. The shadows in the corners of the room coalesced into a form, a dark figure, tall and faceless. "Why do you resist?" It whispered in a voice that was both mine and not mine. I staggered back, heart racing. "This is your legacy," it said. "The true starborn power. You fear it because you don't understand. But together, we could be unstoppable." "Who are you?" I demanded, struggling to maintain my grip on reality. The figure smiled, though no face was visible. "I am the echo of the starborn's darker past, the part they hid, the part the Eldrin feared. I am what you refused to accept." And then, just as quickly, it vanished. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. That night, I realized the war inside me was far from over. The next morning, I told Ren everything. She frowned deeply. "There are legends among the starborn of a shadow echo, a corrupted consciousness born from their hubris and failure. It feeds on fear and doubt, seeking to consume the starborn from within." "Is it real?" I asked, voice shaking. "Real enough to destroy you if you let it." From that day on, every moment became a battle. I trained harder, meditated longer, and trusted my new team more than ever. Mara was my voice of reason when doubt crept in. "You're stronger than this," she said once during a quiet moment. "We all have darkness inside us, but we're not alone." Jalen, with his fierce courage, pushed me beyond my limits during combat drills. "Control comes from action," he said, "from not giving in." And Rena, calm and focused, helped me understand the mental techniques to anchor myself. But even with their support, the shadow echo was relentless. It whispered when I was tired. It tried to twist my memories. It tempted me with promises of power and revenge. Sometimes I wondered, was this darkness the reason the Eldrin hunted us so relentlessly? Did they know about the shadow echo? Did they fear what would happen if it took control? Then, in the midst of the storm, a breakthrough. During a neural sync with Mara, our minds linked in a way I hadn't expected. I saw through her eyes the same visions that haunted me: the Starborn War, the fall of their civilization, the rise of the Eldrin. But I also saw something else, a message hidden in the echoes, a way to fight back. "We have to find the sanctuary," I told the team once we recovered. "What's that?" Rena asked. "An ancient Starborn stronghold, a place of power and knowledge, lost for centuries. The legends say it holds the secret to mastering the Starborn legacy and defeating the Shadow Echo." Ren looked skeptical. "It could be a myth, but it's our best lead," I said. "If we don't find it, we risk losing ourselves and everything we're fighting for." The search for the sanctuary became our new mission. Every clue we uncovered brought us closer and deeper into danger. The Eldrin were hunting us relentlessly now, their attacks growing bolder and more desperate. But we weren't just running. We were fighting together. One night, after a brutal skirmish near a forgotten colony on Europa, I sat by the viewport, bloodied but alive. The stars outside seemed to burn with ancient light. I whispered to the darkness inside me, the shadow echo lurking just beneath the surface. You don't control me. And for the first time, I believed it. The enemy was no longer just out there. It was inside me, and I was ready to fight. We set course for the coordinates traced from ancient starborn star charts, a place spoken of only in whispers and half-forgotten legends. The sanctuary. It wasn't just a location. It was a promise, a myth, a last hope. As the Aegis cut through the cold void toward that distant star system, I felt the weight of all we carried. The newly awakened starborn, still raw with power and uncertainty, looked to me with a mix of hope and fear. The Eldrin weren't the only threat anymore. The darkness inside me, the shadow echo, was like a storm lurking beneath calm waters, ready to tear everything apart. The approach was tense. Sensors picked up faint energy signatures, old, but still pulsing with a strange vitality. We weren't sure if the sanctuary was even intact, or if the Eldrin had found it first and corrupted it. As we drew near, a massive structure emerged from the shadow of a dying star. It was unlike anything I had seen, a sprawling complex of crystalline towers and ancient metallic spires, glowing faintly with starfire. The sanctuary was alive. "Prepare for landing," Ren ordered, her voice steady, but betraying the excitement we all felt. "This place is a treasure trove or a tomb." Our shuttle glided toward the massive structure, sliding into a cavernous docking bay carved from the living rock of an asteroid. The air inside smelled faintly of ozone and something older, like dust and forgotten memories. The moment we stepped inside, I felt it, the pulse of ancient power reverberating through the halls. It was as if the sanctuary itself was breathing, watching us, waiting. Mara and Rena moved cautiously, their senses sharp, attuned to every flicker of energy. "This place, it's like the Starborn never truly left," Mara whispered. "Like they poured their essence into these walls." We reached a chamber at the heart of the sanctuary, a vast hall filled with towering crystals humming with power. At the center, a pedestal held an orb of shimmering light. The Echo Core, the very heart of the Starborn legacy. Ren stepped forward, scanning the orb with her equipment. "This must be the source of the Starborn's power," she said. "A neural nexus that connects all their consciousnesses across time and space." I stepped closer, feeling the orb's warmth spread through my chest. "This is what I've been feeling inside me," I said. "The collective memory, the consciousness. It's alive here." But the moment I touched the orb, the sanctuary shifted. Walls groaned and lights flickered as the Echo Core's energy surged. Suddenly, the shadow echo inside me stirred violently, its whispers turning into a roar. The darkness was trying to claim the sanctuary's power, to consume it and use it to destroy us all. The shadow echo spoke through me. "You cannot contain me. I am the truth you hide, the failure of the Starborn. Without me, you are weak." I struggled to maintain control, feeling the dark presence clawing at my mind. "You're a relic of their mistakes," I replied aloud, voice trembling but firm. "I am their hope, and I will not let you win." Suddenly, the chamber filled with visions. I saw the Starborn at their height, brilliant, radiant beings, wielding power that bent reality. But I also saw their downfall, pride, betrayal, and the rise of the Eldrin. The Shadow Echo had been born from that darkness, a fragment of a Starborn consciousness corrupted by fear and hatred. But there was more, a secret, a way to harness the sanctuary's power without succumbing to the Shadow Echo. Ren shouted, pulling me back from the visions. "We need to synchronize with the Echo Core together," she said. "It's the only way to control it, to integrate the light and dark parts of the Starborn legacy." Mara, Jalen, and Rena joined us, forming a circle around the pedestal. We linked neural interfaces, our minds merging with the Echo Core's vast network. Inside that shared consciousness, time and space dissolved. We floated through memories of a civilization both glorious and tragic. We felt their joys, their fears, and their ultimate sacrifice. Together, we confronted the Shadow Echo not as enemies, but as fractured parts of a whole. It was terrifying and humbling. The darkness inside me wasn't evil. It was a warning, a balance, a guardian of truths too painful to face alone. When we emerged from the neural sink, the sanctuary was still. The Echo Core pulsed gently, harmonized. I felt lighter, stronger. The Shadow Echo was no longer a separate entity trying to control me. It was part of me, and I had learned to accept it. "This changes everything," Ren said, eyes bright with new hope. "The Starborn legacy isn't just power, it's balance. Light and dark, creation and destruction, memory and forgetting. Mara nodded. We are more than warriors now. We are the keepers of that balance. As we prepared to leave the sanctuary, I looked back at the glowing orb one last time. I knew the battle wasn't over. The Eldrin would come, and the war would rage across the stars. But now, I was no longer afraid of the darkness inside me, because I had learned to face it. The sanctuary was a beacon, a new beginning for the Starborn and for humanity. And as the Aegis powered up and set course for the next step of our journey, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The peace we found in the sanctuary was fragile, like a brief breath taken before a plunge into freezing water. We knew the Eldrin wouldn't wait long to strike once we revealed the sanctuary's location. Their hunger for annihilation was relentless, and now, with the Starborn power rekindled inside us, we had become their prime target. But before the war could reach us, there was one thing I needed to understand better: the history of the Starborn-Eldrin conflict. The lessons buried in their past were crucial, not just for survival, but to shape the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. Back on the Aegis, I spent hours poring over the data we recovered from the sanctuary. The Echo Core's memory banks held thousands of years of Starborn knowledge, history, science, philosophy, and war logs. I sat in the dim glow of the holoscreen, running simulations and reading accounts of battles that shaped the galaxy. The Starborn were once the guardians of countless worlds, wielding technology that could bend space and time. But their greatest strength was also their weakness, an unyielding pride and a refusal to yield to compromise. That hubris sowed the seeds of their downfall. The Eldrin, as I learned, were not merely savage conquerors. They were survivors of a shattered civilization, twisted by desperation and a hunger for survival. The Starborn had tried to assimilate or destroy them, believing their way was the only way forward. The war that followed was cataclysmic, a galaxy-spanning conflict that consumed entire star systems. But the most haunting revelation was the emergence of the Shadow Echo itself, born from the Starborn's darkest fears and failures, a psychic weapon that turned against them from within. I realized the Shadow Echo wasn't unique to me alone. It was a manifestation of the collective trauma the Starborn carried, a warning encoded in their DNA, meant to prevent future generations from repeating their mistakes. But I also saw how they had failed to heed that warning, letting fear and pride consume them. As I digested this knowledge, an alert snapped me back to reality. Incoming transmission. Ren called from the bridge. Eldrin warships on intercept course. They found us. The comm I'd felt moments ago shattered like glass. The Eldrin attack was swift and brutal. Their ships appeared from hyperspace like shadows, sleek and deadly. The Aegis rocked under heavy fire as energy bolts screamed past the hull. I strapped into the command chair, hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. Mara, Jalen, Rena, prepare for combat sync. I ordered. We fight not just for survival, but for the future of the Starborn legacy. The neural syncs linked us instantly, our minds merging into a single, focused unit. I could feel Mara's fierce determination, Jalen's razor-sharp reflexes, and Rena's cool precision. Together, we became more than individuals, a force of nature honed by shared purpose. The battle was chaos made beautiful in slow motion. I saw through the eyes of the Eldrin pilots, felt the pulse of their weapons, anticipated their moves before they made them. We danced between laser fire and plasma storms, each strike synchronized and deadly. The power of the Starborn surged in me, energy crackling along my nerves, senses heightened beyond human limits. But the Eldrin were relentless. Their flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with weaponry, emerged from the shadows, a storm of destruction aimed directly at us. Target the flagship, I commanded, voice calm but fierce. We take it down, or we don't survive. The plan was risky. We split into two squads. Mara and Jalen would engage the Eldrin fighters, drawing them away from the ship, while Rena and I focused on penetrating the dreadnought's defenses. Our shuttle darted toward the massive vessel, shields straining under heavy fire. Inside, the corridors twisted like a labyrinth of cold steel and glowing conduits. We moved silently, shadows against the stark metal, hacking into control nodes and planting charges. But as we reached the core reactor, alarms blared. The Eldrin were waiting. A squad of elite soldiers emerged, their weapons humming with dark energy. The firefight was brutal. Jalen's strength and Mara's agility kept them at bay while Rena and I focused on the reactor. "I'll hold them off," Jalen said, voice grim. "Go," I replied, detonating the charges and running for the exit. The explosion shook the ship, flames licking through the corridors. We barely made it to the shuttle as the dreadnought began to collapse. Back on the Aegis, the Eldrin fleet was retreating, but the message was clear. The war was far from over. That night, as the stars wheeled outside the viewport, I sat alone, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. The Starborn legacy was a double-edged sword, a source of incredible power and terrible burden. But in the echoes of war, I found clarity. The fight wasn't just against the Eldrin. It was against the fear, the pride, and the shadows inside all of us. And I vowed that humanity and the Starborn within us would rise above it. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. Even as the Aegis limped through the star lanes, the scars of our encounter with the Eldrin weighed heavily on every one of us. The adrenaline had faded, leaving in its wake a gnawing tension that wrapped around my chest like a vice. I knew we needed allies, powerful ones, if we were to stand a chance against the relentless Eldrin. But trust in this fractured galaxy was a rare commodity. The Starborn legacy was a beacon of hope to some, a threat to others. Our destination was the Solara Coalition, a sprawling alliance of human and alien civilizations that had maintained a fragile peace for centuries. They were cautious but influential. Securing their support could tip the scales, or shatter what little unity still existed. As we approached the Coalition's capital world, Helios Prime, the ship's corridors hummed with quiet urgency. I gathered the team in the briefing room. "We need a diplomatic approach," I said, scanning each face. "Ren, Mara, you're our envoys. Jalen and Rena, you'll be our security detail. I'll coordinate the talks." The landing was tense. Helios Prime was a city world of gleaming towers and sprawling marketplaces. But beneath its glittering surface, the undercurrents of political intrigue ran deep. At the Coalition Council chambers, we were met with suspicion. Counselor Ileana, a tall, sharp-eyed human diplomat, eyed us warily. "The Starborn legacy?" "The Shadow Echo," she repeated, as if tasting bitter medicine. "We have heard the stories. We respect your cause, but many here fear what you represent." The discussions dragged on for hours. I laid out the truth of the Eldrin threat, the power we'd harnessed from the Sanctuary, and the necessity of unity. But old wounds surfaced. The Coalition's leadership was fragmented. Some viewed the Starborn powers as dangerous relics that could spark another devastating conflict. Others saw us as a rallying point for resistance. One counselor, an alien named Varric, leaned forward, his scales shimmering in the dim light. "Your people wield power like a double-edged sword. How can we trust that you won't become the new threat? The Eldrin may be enemies, but unchecked power," his voice cut off as Mara stepped forward. "We do not seek domination," Mara said, eyes blazing. "We are the inheritors of a legacy that nearly destroyed us. But from that destruction, we forged a new path. We accept the Shadow Echo, the darkness within, because it reminds us of what we must never become." The room fell silent. For a moment, I saw the beginning of a fragile understanding. Still, the council was divided. A faction pushed for isolation, arguing the Eldrin threat was overstated and that involving themselves could ignite a war they were unprepared for. I realized then that diplomacy alone wouldn't be enough. We needed to show strength, not just through words, but through action. That night, as the city lights flickered below, I walked the streets of Helios Prime with Jalen and Rena. The people here were like us, hopeful, fearful, caught between survival and surrender. In a quiet alley, a group of insurgents ambushed us. They were desperate, armed with crude weapons and burning resentment toward the Coalition's leadership. Jalen's instincts kicked in immediately, neutralizing threats with precision. Rena's calm hand steadied the situation. I disarmed the leader with words, sensing their anger wasn't truly directed at us, but at the wider chaos consuming the galaxy. The encounter was a stark reminder of the fractures that ran deep, not just between factions, but within hearts. It was easy to paint the Eldrin as the enemy, but the truth was far more complex. We were all survivors trying to navigate a universe that no longer made sense. The next day, the council convened again. This time, with the insurgent attack fresh in our minds, more voices called for unity. Counselor Ileana approached me privately. Your fight is not just against the Eldrin, she said quietly. It's against the fractures within ourselves. If the Starborn legacy is to survive, it must heal those divides. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The Starborn power wasn't just a weapon, it was a responsibility. By the end of the week, the Coalition agreed to a tentative alliance. They would provide ships, intelligence, and ground forces to support our efforts, but with strict oversight. It wasn't a perfect victory. The fractures remained, but it was a start. Back aboard the Aegis, as we prepared to leave Helios Prime, I stood on the observation deck, gazing at the stars. The war ahead was uncertain. Our enemies were powerful and our allies cautious. But the fire within us, the echoes of the Starborn, burned brighter than ever. And I knew, despite the fractures, we would face the darkness together. Leaving Helios Prime behind, I felt the fragile alliance settling into place like a tentative truce on a battlefield. The Solara Coalition's support came with strings attached, oversight committees, diplomatic observers, rules of engagement. It wasn't the unshakable bond I'd hoped for, but it was a foothold, a step forward. Still, the galaxy beyond the Coalition was a wild expanse, the shattered frontier, a region where law and order had fractured, where rogue factions, mercenaries, and warlords carved up systems like a meal. It was also where the Eldrin had entrenched themselves, exploiting chaos to spread their influence. We set course for the Outer Rim, the frontier between the civilized core worlds and the lawless expanse beyond. Our mission: establish a forward base, secure critical star systems, and intercept Eldrin supply lines. The Coalition ships joined ours, their sleek designs a reminder of the diverse cultures bound by uneasy alliance. On the bridge of the Aegis, I stood beside Ren, watching the void slide past the viewport. "It's quiet," she murmured. "Too quiet." I nodded. The calm before the storm was a familiar weight pressing against my nerves. The shattered frontier was a crucible. It tested not just our strength, but our will and resolve. We arrived at the planet Vexor, a battered world once prosperous but now scarred by decades of conflict. Its atmosphere was thick with dust storms, its city skeletal ruins. I led the landing party with Mara, Jalen, and Rena, stepping onto the cracked surface. The air tasted of ash and forgotten promises. Survivors here were wary, shadows of former selves hardened by hardship. We quickly found the local resistance, a loose network of fighters and smugglers united by necessity rather than ideology. Their leader, a grizzled veteran named Kale, greeted us with suspicion. "You Starborn?" he asked, eyeing our gear. "Or just another government gone soft?" I met his gaze steadily. "We're here to help. The Eldrin threaten us all." Kale snorted. "Help? Out here. Help's just a word." Trust was hard-earned. Over days, we shared resources, repaired equipment, and planned strikes against Eldrin convoys supplying their front lines. Kale's fighters were skilled, ruthless in their own right, but plagued by infighting and suspicion. One evening, under a fractured sky painted with twin moons, I sat with Kale and Mara, hashing out strategy. The Eldrin's grip on the frontier was tightening, their raids becoming bolder, more coordinated. "We hit them where it hurts," Kale said, voice low. "Supply chains, communications. But more than that, we need to show them we're not broken." Mara nodded, eyes burning with resolve. "We carry the Starborn legacy. We will be their reckoning." The next days were a blur of ambushes, raids, and close calls. I felt the shadow echo surge within me, a storm of power and fear. Each time I tapped into it, the voices whispered, doubts, memories, warnings, but also strength. During one operation, we intercepted an Eldrin convoy near the shattered ruins of Carix. The firefight was fierce, lasers slicing through the twilight, explosions throwing clouds of dust and debris. Jalen fought like a force of nature, Mara's precision tore through enemy lines, and Rena's tactical mind kept us one step ahead. But amid the chaos, a warning came over comms. A larger Eldrin fleet was inbound. Reinforcements. Retreat was the only option. The withdrawal was brutal. Our forces scattered, suffering losses that burned deep. I watched the battlefield retreat behind us, the weight of failure settling like a stone in my gut. Back at the makeshift base, the mood was grim. Kale's fighters were fractured further, blame passed like a poison. I gathered the team. "We can't afford to fall apart now," I said firmly. "The Shadow Echo is not just power, it's a reminder of what we survive. We have to be more than soldiers. We have to be a beacon. That night, unable to sleep, I walked alone through the battered camp. The stars above twinkled cold and distant, but I found solace in their light. The frontier wasn't just a battleground for territory, it was a fight for hope. In the darkest places, even a small spark could ignite a wildfire. I realized then that the true battle wasn't just against the Eldrin, it was against despair, against the fractures within ourselves and those we sought to protect. Over the following weeks, we rebuilt. We forged stronger bonds with the Resistance, mediating disputes and sharing visions for a future beyond survival. One evening, as I was reviewing maps in the command center, Ren approached quietly. "We received a message," she said, voice low. "From the Eldrin. They want to negotiate." A ripple of disbelief passed through the room. Negotiation? From the Eldrin? I stared at the message. A simple but chilling proposal. A ceasefire. Talks for peace. The offer was a trap. Of that, I was certain. But it was also an opportunity, one we had to consider carefully. The shattered frontier was no longer just a place of chaos. It was the stage for the next act in a war that would decide the fate of stars. And I was determined to make sure humanity, and the Starborn legacy, emerged from it stronger than ever. The message from the Eldrin hung in the air like a storm cloud refusing to break. Negotiations? A ceasefire? It was the last thing I expected after months of relentless warfare, but it demanded careful thought. War wasn't just fought with weapons, it was fought with minds, with words, with trust and betrayal. Back on the Aegis, I gathered my closest advisors in the command room. Ren, Mara, Jalen, and Rena. The glow of starfields behind the viewport cast flickering shadows on their faces. We were war-weary, yet every decision felt heavier than the last. "We can't ignore this," I said, breaking the silence. "Whether it's a trap or not, this is the Eldrin reaching out. We have to decide how to respond." Mara's eyes burned with fire. "You think they want peace? They want to break us. Or maybe they're afraid of us," Ren said quietly. "The Starborn legacy, it's unpredictable, powerful, maybe even to them." Jalen's voice was firm but cautious. "I say we prepare for war, but send a delegation. Keep our options open. If we refuse outright, we lose leverage. If we accept blindly, we risk annihilation." Rena nodded. "Agreed. We need to gather intelligence before any talks. We can't walk into this blind." The debate raged late into the night, but the decision came down to necessity. We would send envoys, diplomats armed with reason and guarded by soldiers, me among them. The meeting point was an ancient space station at the edge of the shattered frontier, a relic from a forgotten era now crawling with Eldrin forces. The station, the Meridian, was a hollow shell of rust and shattered dreams, floating in the abyss. I took a deep breath as our small shuttle docked with the Meridian. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dim corridor lined with faded banners bearing the Eldrin insignia, a reminder of the long shadow their empire cast. We were met by a delegation of Eldrin commanders, their features sharp and alien, eyes glinting with cautious calculation. Their leader, a tall, imposing figure named Thalrak, stepped forward. His voice was cold but measured. "We recognize your power, Starborn," he said, "and we seek a future where annihilation is not the only path." The talks were tense, fraught with mistrust. Every word was weighed, every phrase dissected for hidden meaning. The Eldrin offered a ceasefire, limited access to certain star systems, and a joint effort to combat rogue elements destabilizing the galaxy further. But beneath the veneer of diplomacy, I sensed their true aim: division. They sought to fracture the fragile coalition by isolating factions and exploiting old rivalries. I pressed Thalrak hard. "If peace is your goal, why not disarm? Why continue to spread fear and subjugation?" He smiled thinly. "Peace requires strength and compromise. We are willing to negotiate, but not at the expense of our survival." Days passed in a whirlwind of discussions, with neither side fully trusting the other. Meanwhile, our team worked tirelessly, gathering intelligence and assessing Eldrin capabilities. One evening, Ren approached me with troubling news. "We intercepted transmissions," she said. "The Eldrin are mobilizing a secret fleet. They plan a coordinated strike once talks falter." It confirmed my fears. The ceasefire was a gambit to buy time, to weaken us before a devastating blow. I relayed the information to the delegation in secret, careful not to tip off Thalrak. "We must prepare," I said. "This war is far from over." The final day of negotiations arrived. The Council of the Coalition watched anxiously from afar, their faith fragile. In the chamber, I faced Thalrak once more. Your fleet approaches, I warned. Peace must be real, or it ends here. His gaze hardened. The future is uncertain, but know this. We will not be broken. As we departed the meridian, tension hung thick in the air. Our shuttle tore away from the station, just as sensors lit up with warnings. Eldrin fleets emerging from the shadows. The war erupted anew, fiercer than ever. Back on the Aegis, I stood on the bridge as alarms blared, the stars outside turning into streaks of light as we launched into battle formation. The shadow echoes surged within me, a tempest of raw power and memories. The voices were louder now, urging me forward, warning of the path ahead. Our allies from the coalition rallied beside us, their ships forming a protective barrier as Eldrin warships closed in. The battle was brutal. Lasers sliced through space, explosions blossomed like deadly flowers, and every moment demanded courage and precision. I felt the weight of every decision, every loss, but also the strength of the legacy I carried. We fought not just for survival, but for a future where the Starborn could be more than echoes of the past. In the heat of combat, I found clarity. The power of the Shadow Echo was not just a weapon or curse, but a beacon, a reminder that even in darkness, humanity could shine brightest. As the battle raged on, I knew this was only the beginning. The war for the galaxy's soul was far from over, but whatever the future held, I was ready to face it. The echoes of the Starborn would resound through the stars, fierce, unyielding, and hopeful.